All right, welcome to part 2. In part 1, we finished with this scene that you can see here so far. And in this video, we're going to be finishing off the scene so that by the end of it, we hopefully have something that resembles this. Large steps, I know. But essentially what we're going to do in this order, we're going to be adding in some large boulders, placing them by hand. Then we're going to be adding in some broken rocks around the large boulders. Then we're going to be making some alterations to the pebbles and everything so it doesn't look so completely evenly placed everywhere. Then we'll do some slight adjustments to the background, some final compositing, and then we'll do the render. So that, yeah, we've got a lot to get through, so let's get started on it. First things first, the boulders. So I'm on a new layer now, and I'm going to go to File, Append, and I'm going to bring in this rock here, Rocks, Mountain, Large from the Rock Essentials. So we're going to select Group and the Large, just like what we did before. And you can see that it gives you 3 large mountainy type rocks. These are ones that I've found to be, they work pretty well for this type of Mars scene. Obviously we don't have photo scanned rocks from Mars, but they look pretty similar to reference photos. So first thing you want to do, because we're going to be duplicating these a lot when we place them in our scene. So before we place them by hand, we want to check that the material actually matches or looks similar to the ground. And you can see currently it does not. It's way too bright. And as you can see, if you zoom in, you got a little bit of green on that rock there. So that's kind of breaking the illusion. So first things first, if we just select one of the rocks there, if you go to Properties, as you'll know if you have the Rock Essential, oh, I've just selected the ground. If you have the Rock Essentials, you'll know that we have all the little properties here that you can quickly adjust. So what I'm going to adjust first of all is drop the saturation to 0 because we don't want there to actually be any of that green color coming through. And I'm going to drop the value of these down to 0.1, which will make them very dark rocks. But when we add in the dust and dirt layer in a second, it should look a lot nicer. And as well as that, I'm going to drop the reflection amount to, almost nothing. So let's go 0.02 perhaps. So just a slight amount of reflection is okay, but you obviously don't want too much because there's no moisture on Mars that we know of, at least. Okay, so I'll drop the value 0.1, 0.02. Actually, for that one, that surface is actually a little kind of reflective. Actually, I'll just increase the roughness. Okay, there we go. And we'll do the exact same one for this one. Saturation dropped. Reflection amount 0.02. Increase the roughness. Okay, cool. All right, so they now all have same sort of look. Looks a little bit better than it did before, but it doesn't look like it belongs in the scene. So to do that, the biggest thing, of course, is adding in that dirt group that we created in part 1. So if we go to search and just type in dirt, it'll bring in the no group, which when we add it, now makes our rock look as though it does look a little bit more a part of the scene. So I'm just going to do that for all 3 of them. And one more over there. And we're good. So if I drag this down, make it sort of touch the ground, you can see that it does sort of, yeah, it starts to look a little bit like it belongs in the scene, hopefully. We can, of course, tweak this value because I think it might be a little bit too, I don't know, a little bit too bright, a little bit too pinkish, perhaps. Too bright. Oh, I don't know if that's better or worse. And I think maybe a little bit more orange, not so red. Okay, there we go, a little bit better. It's like minor adjustments and you eventually get there. Okay, that's pretty good. So now that we've got that, now we can start placing the rocks. Now we could use a particle system, which is what we did in part 1. We just used these little particle systems to individually place all the rocks, or sorry, automatically place all the rocks across the surface. But if we did that for this, you wouldn't have very much control over it, and it's not what we want. So instead, what we're going to do is place them by hand. So we want to create, just going off the story of the scene, like there to be like a bunch of large rocks at the top of the hill, which I did actually find to be true looking at a lot of reference photos of Mars. A lot of the big boulders and stuff, they sort of accumulate around the tops of the hills. I don't know why that is, but probably on Earth as well. Anyway, now you can place them by hand like this, but what I like to do is change to face snap like that. And then if you've selected an object and then you hit, oh, by the way, I'm using Alt-D, not Shift-D, because Alt-D it'll conserve memory. So it's not creating a new mesh element. They're all sharing the same mesh element. So Alt-D, and then when you want to place it somewhere, you just hold down Control, and then it will snap it to whatever object it is currently touching. So if I just keep it on the surface there, it places it. It does place it underneath it, which is pretty annoying. I don't know. I wish there was, maybe somebody knows. Is there a way that you can make it actually just snap to the top of the surface and not have to pull it up through again? That would be cool. I don't know. Okay, so this is basically it. Now, I'm not going to lie. It's not exactly thrilling, but it's something that you'll have a lot of control over it. And it's, it's a small part of the scene, just adding some rocks at the top of the hill, maybe a few others scattered around, but yeah. Now, one thing I found that will actually help it look like Mars is these pointy shapes, like jagged slopes like that. Even if Mars does actually have a few rocks that look like this, like sort of on a slant. It's just one of those things which I think we inherently assume is like alien when it's on like a weird spiky slant like that. That's just sort of like the stereotypical alien rock. So yeah, we're definitely going to make use of that and try and make some interesting spiky looking rocks. If you double tap R, by the way, it uses the trackball function. So normal rotation is just there, but if you double tap it like that, then you can rotate it on all axes, which is another little handy tip. All right, this is going to be very boring if I did this all in real time. So I'm going to do a time lapse now of me finishing off the scene, placing these rocks. And we're done. So I just did a render of this, and it looks pretty good. It's not bad. I put a rock in the foreground here, which is sort of blocking the view a little bit. So I'll probably remove that or tweak it a little bit. But other than that, the rocks seem to be in good formation. And yeah, now we can move on to the next bit, which is adding in some rock heaps. So you'll notice, looking at this, that it's pretty easy to tell the different rock elements apart. You've got some small little pebbles, you've got some medium pebbles, and you've got some large pebbles. But there's no relation between them. So where there's big rocks, there's generally some smaller rocks that sort of surround it. So as I was watching Kanye West's weird music video whilst that was rendering. I'll show you a couple of reference photos. Where is it? Reference photos. Okay, so here, for example, you've got a few little pieces, little chips off it there. I mean, they're sort of scattered everywhere, sort of randomly, but you can see they are. There's that one, which is, hang on a second. Let me get it. Okay, so this one, for example. Yeah, so lots of, wherever the big rocks are, there's lots of like small pieces that are around it. We're basically sort of insinuating that it's sort of broken off of one larger element. So normally that would require you to do a lot more hand placing of individual medium rocks, like in groups, and make 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them. But we actually captured something for the Rock Essentials, which is perfect for something like this. So if we go to File, Append, I'll show you what I'm going to use. It's these heaps. So click on Heaps, load this in, Group, and click Append. Now these are actually super handy. These are photo scanned real rock heaps. So if you give it a render, you'll see what they look like. But basically, it's a real collection of smaller rocks all together in a group. Now, you wouldn't think that they would be that useful. However, because they're sort of like the naturally occurring, like the way real rocks are sort of placed together, they can be used in a variety of different ways. Like when we were assembling the different promotional material for the Rock Essentials, we all realized just how useful these little heaps are. Because, you can place them on the ground and it makes the ground underneath it disappear and you just see these little rocks on it, which is what I'll do in a second. First, though, if what we're going to do is change the material of these rocks, just like we did with the boulders before. We're going to change it so that they look as though they're a little bit more a part of the scene. So again, adjusting the value and the reflection amount. I'll just turn that to 0 and make sure that there's no yellowy. Actually, I mean, there was a little bit of yellow there, but I don't think there's any green, so I think I'll just keep that. That's all right. And then I'll just do the same here. 0.5. 0.1, 0. Okay, actually what I'll do, because it's kind of hard to guess at this point what it's going to look like with the dirt, so I'll just start adding the dirt in right now, just so that we can, if we want to tweak something now, we can. Okay, that looks pretty good. Yeah, so the good thing about creating a group is that, yeah, you do it once, and then you never have to really touch it. You can just use it, and then if you want to make an adjustment to it later on, like you want to change the dirt color like what I did before, then you absolutely can, because you just do it once and then it's reflected across all of them. So that's a cool thing. There we go. It's got 2 more to do. And it's so it's so weird. Like, there's so many things that you do in Blender that you don't really think about as being very boring, because while you're working, you're always thinking about stuff. But then the moment you record a video, and it's just immediately tedious, because you're supposed to be, I don't know, making a video that's somewhat interesting, and you just have to repeat this thing. Yeah, and you have to fill it with talk like this. All right, whew. Okay, we're done. So now what we're going to do is, just like before, we're going to place these by hand. So let's bring in the original large rocks here. So what we're going to do is, wherever there's a cluster of these boulders, sort of around it, I'm going to hit Alt D, and then I'm going to place it around about there. Now this is, I mean, again, it's one of those things where it's pretty boring, and you have to do it like repetitively. There. Just like that. So you've got just a few rocks just sort of peeking through it, which if you look at it from the point of view of the camera, it sort of looks a little bit like that. Now, you wouldn't think that this adds a lot, but it does really help the realism of the scene. So I'm using that same double tapping the R key, which is really what you use constantly whilst you're doing this, because you have to make it, you have to make the rotation at just the right angle as the ground, and that's where that trackball rotation, double tapping R, really helps. Okay, so something like that. So again, this is going to be super boring if I did this all in real time, so jump to the time lapse. And we're done. So I just gave it a quick render. Not really quick, actually. It was 10 minutes, 10 gigabytes of memory. But you can see it looks a lot nicer now. Like, especially around these big boulders here. The smaller heaps really do help it feel like it's a real rock formation. It's not just a bunch of loose boulders that are placed together. They've actually got some method to the madness. Or I don't even know if that fits. Anyways, honestly, if this was going to be a final scene, I'd spend a lot longer. I'd add a few more rock heaps. Maybe I'd take some of the medium boulders and I'd maybe place them around there so that you've actually got, you know, an even greater variant. So it's not just large and like kind of smallish medium ones, but you've also got some maybe chunkier ones around it as well. But we do have to move on. So we should get on to the next thing, which is, oh, also, by the way, the foreground. You know, these rocks here don't look all that great, and honestly, that's a good point, I should be using high detail mode since they are in the foreground. So I'll just turn that on there now, and they should obviously look a lot better there. Basically, turning on high detail mode, for those who don't have the Rock Essentials, what it does is it just enables an extra subsurf modifier and an extra displacement that is, it's really only necessary when it's close to the camera, because it does add a lot of extra geometry to the render. But yeah, anyway, that should come out looking a lot nicer in the next render. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is something to make all the rocks feel like they are somehow connected to the ground, embedded in the ground. Now we've talked about, you know, we've done the dirt shader on it, and it does look definitely a lot better. Like, it looks like it's a lot more a part of the scene than without it, but it is still just resting on a otherwise completely unaltered surface. Now, if we have a look at real reference photos from Mars, or even the desert, you'll find that where the rocks are, you have sand that builds up around it. So like on that edge there. And that's just natural. So as sandstorms blow over the top of it, you get it so that it's like the rock is half embedded. There we go. That's a better photo, where it's sort of like building up around it, kind of like a tent pole. If that, I don't know if that makes sense. That doesn't fit really, but you know what I mean. Like, it's a sloping up the edge of the rock there. So looking at this, like, as I was making this scene, I was like, oh man, how could I do that effect? There's no way I'm going to, you know, paint it by hand, like with a sculpting brush. That would just take hours. And I sort of just gave up on the idea. And then one of the guys that works for me, actually, Gilholm Henrik, he's like, why don't you bake the ambient occlusion onto the thing, and then use that ambient occlusion map as a displacement modifier? And that's the solution, and it works brilliantly. But the only thing is that baking the ambient occlusion, it will take a while, and once you've done it, you don't want to be moving the rocks anymore, because it'll then have these divots, these sand divots where there aren't rocks. So you want to make sure that your rocks are completely signed off on and completely, you know, done. You can change the material later on, but the placement of them needs to look good now. So there is, actually, before we get to that, now that I've mentioned that, there is a couple of things we want to just quickly change with the rock placement. So it looks good, but it is just a completely even spread of these rocks everywhere, and that's not very natural to how it occurs in real life. Nothing is ever completely evenly spread. So what I'm going to do is right here, I'm going to make it look like a small pool where there aren't rocks, like it's a little area where there's no rocks. So so I went to Control Tab, which is what brought me to weight paint mode. And we are using the vertex group, which we used before, to make that weight gradient. So that weight gradient is controlling. Oh, it's not controlling that one. Okay, well, I can do that then. Make it apply for that one, but it should already be controlling the small one. Okay. So they're now both using that same vertex group. So what we can do is I can paint with a 0 weight brush and just create an area that is blue like that. I'll make it completely sparse like that. So looking at it from the point of view of the camera, it'll have that sort of effect. And I'll do a couple more. I didn't do this for the final one, but I should have. Just a few extra little spots of where you would find less like that, and you can just sort of hit them like that. You can use a cloud texture, like like a noise texture or any sort of texture in particle systems, but I haven't found it to be that good, honestly. Like when you use, like if you go to the particle settings down here, yeah, you can add in a texture, but it's odd. It's very hard to see the effect, and it's like it doesn't actually make the particles not appear there. It's like they're hidden, but it's still count. Like, so say you've got like 10,000 particles on your ground surface. It's like if you use the cloud thing, it'll just make like half of them disappear, but so then you need to increase the particle count to make up for the ones that are lacking. It's just odd, honestly. I'm just not a big fan of it. So yeah. Anyways, okay. So I'm just trying to make it look as, you know, random. Again, you probably put in a little bit more detail if you were doing the final thing. But let's have a look at that. I'll just turn on the ground. There we go. And I want to turn on the other ones as well, the medium ones, and just do a final check over. There we go. So that looks pretty good to me. So that looks a lot more natural than just having a completely even spread everywhere. In fact, I might make another one just over there. It's a minor thing anyway, but just off in the distance, or not too far off in the distance actually, but something around about here. So I'll just do another sort of area where there's no particles. I shouldn't have done it with the particle system turned on, but I'm too lazy to go back and turn it off now. All right, come on. Let's do another one right there. And another one right there. It's really the trick to making good environments is doing stuff that just takes time. That's why I honestly think you know, if you can have software that does this stuff automatically, like, you know, a dedicated nature software, environment builder that automatically, you know, does this sort of stuff. You can add variants or stuff to the placement of rocks. I think you assemble scenes so much quicker and it comes out so much more realistic, not because the tools are that much better, but because it saves you so much time and you end up doing things that you otherwise couldn't be asked doing. Anyway, all right, let's, yeah, I'll do another quick, and it'll take me another 10 minutes, but let's do another render and let's see how that turns out. All right, there we go. Looks pretty good. You can see those, just that little patch there and little ones there, it really adds a lot to the scene. Just makes it feel less CG because it is, you know, something that was crafted by hand, which is altering it. So that's really cool. All right, so now let's get on to the baking of the ambient occlusion. So for those who don't know, ambient occlusion, what it does is where objects intersect or are close to each other, ambient occlusion will add like a fake shading, like a fake shadow kind of thing, but not related to any of the lights in your scene. So it's like a fakery. Basically, it's a real thing that happens in real life, which is that when objects are closer together, as they get towards a meeting point, there's less and less light that can actually bounce inside there, so it becomes darker. But we're actually going to be using it, like I mentioned, not for any shading or anything like that. We're just going to use it to make a different effect. So we're going to bake down here. We're going to bake, just selecting the ground, make sure that I've got this right. We're going to bake the ambient occlusion. That guy right there, ambient occlusion. Now, before you do this, you have to have an image loaded in the UV image editor. So we'll add one here. So it has to be, yeah, we have to give it an image to start with. So we'll call this AO. That makes sense. Now the size of it, I'm just going to use 2000 by 48. Whoops. Yeah, so just double the default. Now you could probably even get away with less because displacement, like I remember one of the, yeah, Gilherm again was telling me, like, in relation to displacements, like anything over 3K for a displacement map is like overkill, because that's like, in order for it to actually affect the geometry properly, like you need to have like, I can't remember how many millions of polygons. So 2K is probably even too far as well, but you know, we just want to try and capture all these little pebbles and stuff. All right, I'll stop talking. Let's just actually, let's do it so that you can actually see, because otherwise it's very confusing to just hear someone rambling on without knowing what's going on. So the other thing is you want to actually have the, again, I don't know why you need to do this, but in the image edit, sorry, in the node editor, you need to have the image loaded in. So I'll just call it, yeah, just select AO. I don't know if non-color data will change anything, but let's do that. Okay, that's set. Oh, we have to give it an, save the image as well. So let's do that. Where do I save it? Textures, maybe, textures. Yeah, let's do that. Save it. Good. And now we're going to hit bake. Now this will take a little while. Okay, so there's a little progress bar at the top there. In my past ones that I've done, it can take up to 20 minutes, which is why I said you really only want to do this once after you've placed all the rocks. So anyway, let's see how long it actually takes. All right, we are done. So this is what the AO map looks like when baked. So just like what I described, essentially it's trying to approximate, you know, where the meshes are either touching or very close to touching, and then doing some shading, which we don't want for shading, but we're going to use it to affect the displacement of the sand. It'll make sense when we actually do it. Before we actually load it into a displacement though, this by itself, like displacement, if you'll know if you use the displacement modifier, it doesn't like sharp textures, because displacement tries to treat like every pixel like white. That's a low, thing. And as soon as it goes black, it's like 100% raised geometry, So it would basically create this very spiky looking texture. So what we're going to do is, where is my Photoshop? Oh, there it is. What we're going to do is we're going to load this in to our, into any image editor. I'm just loading it into Photoshop. Doesn't really matter which one you use. I just have to hope I can find the thing. Textures. Oh, I haven't saved it yet. Yeah, make sure you save it. Otherwise, you'll have to rebake it. That took me, by the way, like 25 minutes, I think it was. Yeah, not good to have to redo it. You only learn that once. You close Blender by accident and without saving your image. It's like, Anyway, so I've loaded in here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to blur it. So with the Gaussian blur, let's blur it. Let's say about, you can play with it later on if you don't like the exact result, but okay, something like this. The other thing this is going to do is also, it's going to make, like for the big rocks, it's going to make more of a sloped, more of a sloped surface sort of going into it, instead of it just being like almost nothing there. Anyway, it'll be visible essentially. Let's save it into a separate, just call it 2, of course. All right, now here comes the magic. Dun, 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 dun. Let's see if this actually looks good. Okay, so you want to select your ground. First of all, we're going to hide these this stuff, because otherwise it's going to be really slow. Let's get rid of that stuff for now as well. And let's go, first of all, load in a displacement modifier. Yep. And we want to put this, where do we want to put it? On top? No, underneath? I can't remember which order it's supposed to be. We'll figure it out. Let's go load in a new texture. Then go to the texture panel and click the one which says displace. And we'll just call this the AO. And that will, by the way, actually change the name over here as well, which is something that's rare in Blender for the name to actually affect another name. So we're going to go open, and it's underneath textures, AO2, load it in. Now the first thing, you'll notice is it's very spiky like this. We'll change that in a second, but first thing, change the color space to non-color data, like I think I mentioned before, maybe not. But non-color data, you're supposed to use it for, like everything texture related in Blender. I didn't know it until just recently, but yeah, there's non-color data for displacement as well. Didn't change anything here, but sometimes it does. Then for the texture coordinates, very important, make sure you set it to UV. Otherwise it'll use, local or whatever it is, which is weird. Then you want to apply the scale of the ground, because I think if we scaled up the plane at the beginning, you can see the scale here is all completely whack. So hit Control A and then select scale. And there we go. Now it's the wrong direction, so it's sort of digging into the surface instead of sticking up. So let's change that. I'm going to go minus 0.1. Okay. Now, it doesn't look very sharp, so what we can do is we can add a subsurf modifier on top of it, like that. Let's give it another one there, and now you can see we've got a bumpy surface. So when we load in some of our rocks, you can see what it's doing. So right there, you've got this bumpy surface coming through. So it looks as though where there was a rock, it's now built up this, this sort of bumpiness to it. It's not perfect, like in some areas it'll actually stick through. You can turn it down if that's the case, if you don't, something like that. But it should start to look a little nicer now. Now we can actually load back in the particle systems just to see how they look. Okay, now they are actually loading up. Oh, what happened there? Hang on a sec. Oh, there we go. Sometimes Blender does that. I just had to go into edit mode and go out of it again. So we just want to check. So the order of them is important. So the particle system on top, it's placing the rocks where they are on the plane first, and then underneath that, we're then adding the displacement. If we did it the other way, we can actually try that. Let's move it, but underneath that one, and then this underneath that one. Now you can see that that's the order that needs to be. So the particle system needs to be last, because you want the displacement first, so that it's sort of like it's sticking through the ground a little bit. Wait, was that correct? Let me see that. I don't know anymore. Okay, I mean, the smaller pebbles are so small that you wouldn't really see a little bump there anyway. But yeah, I just want to check that it's looking as good as it can be. Because what you don't want is you don't want there to be like, actually we can sort of see this if we exaggerate it. You don't want them to sort of like be sitting on top of the surface, which I guess is what that sort of looks like. Hang on, let me try this again. Let's put this on top. Apologies for doing this all in real time. I've rehearsed this tutorial many times, but I'm sure you'd agree that this is one of the more in-depth tutorials, and you can't remember everything. Yeah, I'm going to place it underneath. Yeah. It's one of the reasons that long tutorials are like, I dread doing these long format ones because there's so much to remember. Did it change the particle system? Hang on. I mean, I guess the... Oh, no, it's just sort of lowering it. It looks as though they've sort of changed. Anyway, that looks pretty good. Okay, what we want... Yeah, we want to change back the maximum height. I'll make a 0.08. So you want it to be just tall enough, but not sort of... yes, peeking through too many of the rocks, if you can get away with it. But that looks... Yeah, it looks all right to me. Yeah, and what I might do... Because that's pretty much the only area where it's sort of... It's annoying, so I'll just grab that little rock there and I'll just move it up. Oh boy, yeah, that's tough to play with. Yeah, I mean honestly, that's I think I'll stick with that. That's all right with me. You could actually, if you wanted to, increase the subsurface, which I think I'll actually do. I think for my final scene that I went with, I think I went with four levels of subsurf for the ground, because the higher res that you make it, the more detail you're actually going to see in the little sloped boulders and things. But you can see now, like now that we've done that, like so you can see the edge of this rock here. It's now raising up as it goes towards that rock, you know, simulating dirt that's, you know, been brushed against it. So yeah, cool little trick, and it should start to feel a little bit more like Mars now, which should be nice. I might just exaggerate that just a little more as well. Just because we can. Let's see. Okay. All right. Now let's, I'll save this as a separate file. It's always good to save different versions. Let's do a render. This is what we had before. I'm sure this will take longer than the 10 minutes now, but let's see how that goes. All right. We are done. So I actually rendered it twice. So this is what it looked like with no displacement. This is, wait, no, this is with, okay, that was, so this was no displacement. This is a little bit of displacement, and then I re-rendered it to exaggerate it even further. And actually I've realized, looking at this, that it is actually better to put the displacement underneath it, because... sorry, put the particle system on top, because if you do it basically you want the rocks to look embedded into the soil, and if they were underneath it, then they're placed on top of it, which of course makes sense. But when you do this, which is what I've just done, some of them start to disappear, and like the mid-level here, like that can affect the rocks that are over there. So if I set this to like 0.5, some of these rocks will come back, but then these ones here won't be as embedded into it. Like, yeah, honestly, it's just a matter of tweaking it and tinkering with it. Yeah, and it's something that doesn't really translate well to tutorials. So if I was, you know, working on this scene myself, I would maybe alter that AO pass in Photoshop. Gosh, this one here, and maybe like I'd maybe make another layer, and I'd maybe like paint over this to make it less intense on those little rock areas. Yeah, doing a little bit of that would help to curb that crazy slope that's sort of showing through there. In fact, I could just save that. Let's just load that in there. I was talking about how it might be too long, but, you know, we can give it a go. Let's just see if this works. And of course, the slowest thing is Photoshop saving the file. Yeah, all right, come on. Let's do this quickly. Get to it. We got people dropping off. if it's done correctly, some of these little rock areas should come back. There we go. Okay, I forgot about that one there, but you get the point. It just takes a little bit of tweaking for all of it. It's not a perfect system, but you get the point. So what we're going to do now is stuff for the background, and it's honestly just a repeat of what is in the foreground, but more lazy. Because, yeah, we're basically just adding in that same particle system. We're going to skip the displacement. So what I'm going to do is, with this plane here selected, I'm just going to give it the same particle system that we've already got. So we've got medium rocks here. I'm going to create a duplicate of it so that it doesn't adjust the main one there. But I'm going to create more rocks, like let's say 10 times the existing amount. What are the sizes of those? Okay, they're not really big enough, so let's increase the size underneath here. Let's make it 0.4. I don't know if that's going to be too big. Let's have a look at that from here. Yeah, that's going to be too big. Let's go 0.2. Okay, so something like that. You do want it to feel like it is really far away, and if you do sort of adjust this too much, that might even be too much, then it will look a little bit odd. As well as that, I won't bother with the little small pebbles because I don't think at this distance you would really see them anyway. But what I will do is I'll make a little hump way in the back here, because what I want to do is I want to have a little ring, which is just going to create... Yeah, I mean, it's part of the story. I'm sure you get it. It's like it's an alien artifact, and the astronaut is just discovering for the first time that we are not alone. There is another intelligent species out there, and they've been building stuff for years, and they've left one of their things on Mars. So, yeah. Now, for the ring itself, here's what I did. I used Substance Designer. So this is a very... okay, so the modeling for this is super easy. As you can see, it's just a circle which has been extruded a couple of times and then UV unwrapped. So why am I using Substance Painter? Did I say Painter or Design for? I'm using Painter. Why am I using Substance Painter? Well, it's honestly, you could do this in Blender, but you would get wrapped up in all sorts of node groups. And as I showed you before with the... yeah, I'm just not a fan of painting in Blender. It's just, right now, it's really too complicated. And the cool thing about Substance Designer is, and they haven't paid me at all to say this, I wish they would, that'd be cool. But you can paint on, like you can paint with color and roughness and displacement. Like you can choose, like say I want to paint the color, so I'll make this like maybe a green color, and I'll make it affect the height positively, and I'll increase the roughness, and then you can just paint with it. Like that, and then it bakes. So then when you export it, it exports that the green part into the color channel, the roughness part into the roughness channel, the height into the height channel, all that kind of thing. And it's a nice, honestly, it's like Photoshop but for 3D. If you're familiar with Photoshop and the layering system, it's pretty much exactly the same. You've got groups, you've got adjustment layers, you can paint, you've got masks. It's really, like, the first time I use it, I mean, you pick it up pretty quickly, and I'm a fan of it. I honestly think it's the reason that the industry is, like, it's taking on so well, because it just works so bloody well. Now, I know, yeah, like people are going to be writing in the comments, like, come on, why are you using Substance Painter? Blender can do this. Yes, it can, but it would make this tutorial like another 20 or 30 minutes long, whereas Substance Painter, I mean, this, even though I've had it already loaded up, I did this in, I think, 2 minutes. I just grabbed a dirt brush, one of these, like it's got this textured brush thing, and then I just painted in some roughness wherever I wanted the roughness to be. I gave it like a little dirt color like this, and I just went, yeah, and then you just export it, you just export the maps, and then you bring it in, and it works nicely. So anyways, I'll put the ring way in the background. So let me load in the ring, which I believe I exported as a FBX. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, I guess I need to go import FBX. Aha, there we go. All right. Practice alien ring FBX. Even though it was modeled in Blender to begin with, now I'm loading it in as an FBX. But it's the same sort of thing. Okay, let's just check that the UV coordinates are there. Should be. Yes, it is. Good. And then for the actual... Oh, okay, we don't want that. I think it tries to guess based on the FBX, but I'll just create a new one. Now, if you followed the PBR tutorial thing, you would have the PBR Uber setup, which is really, it's perfect for Substance Painter because you just plug in the maps one by one. So when you export from Substance Painter, you just go like File. Like this isn't obviously a Substance Painter tutorial, but I'm just showing you how it's done. It exports all the little maps like that. So then when you get them, you just go to import multiple images. And then textures, which one is it? Mars version 2. Oh man, I hope I'm not the only one that has this problem. Like you practice, no, recordings, redo, no. Like when you create a scene and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. There we go. And you forget, or you just don't bother with the file structure until it's too late, and you got stuff going everywhere. But anyways, so the height one, I don't know if I'll use that. The roughness one, plug that in there. This one is the DirectX. I don't know what DirectX does. Get rid of that. I think that's a different type of normal map. This is the normal map. Plug that in there. But make sure that it goes through a normal map node to convert it properly. And then this one should be the metallic. So this will define which parts of it are diffuse, which parts of it are metallic, because it's going through the Uber shader, which is that whole elaborate setup that we did in the previous tutorial. Yeah, so setting anything that's grayscale or not a colored texture, so normal maps, all that kind of stuff needs to be set to non-colored data. But then, if you've done everything correctly, you should have, it should come out fine. Now, this will require some tweaking, I think. I don't even know if that's the correct whatever. Maybe these things need to be flipped around. But it's fine for this tutorial. I'm sure you get the idea. Really, this is a Mars tutorial. I'm not really teaching you. Like, you didn't come here to find out how to make an alien artifact ring. I'm sure there are far better tutorials out there for things like this. I'm just giving you the Cliff Note version. Now, the other thing you'd want to do is just like what we did here for the foreground, sorry, for our foreground here, is hand placing these rocks. You'd want to create, like, take one of these big rocks and then just throw it like way out into the distance. In fact, if I hold down Control, I can snap it there already, like that. You know, so you would want to create a few clusters of rocks just in the background there, just on that point, to break it up, because you don't want to have this uniform particle effect there. The other thing you could do, by the way, if you're trying to conserve memory, is you could use the weight paint tool to paint out everything that's not in view in the camera, which in this case is actually most of it. Like if you go to vertex groups, whoa, this thing's just chilling there. Okay. And then we go into weight paint mode. If we give it some weight and then paint like this, there we go. So I would just, oh, what happened? What are you doing? Weird, 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 weird. Yeah, I'd just paint like this. I mean, I would do it probably better than what I'm doing right now, but you know what I mean. Because that's the only area that you're actually going to see to the camera. Oh, that's why it disappeared. It went out of clipping mode. That's the weird thing. When you work with large scenes in Blender, it just doesn't seem to function as well. I mean, it's probably just to do with the display settings down there. But anyway. Okay, yeah, you just do that. And then with your particle system, you just change it to that one. And now the particles would actually appear properly. Like, you wouldn't have to use as many of them. But yeah, there you go. Okay, so we will do a final render of this, but one thing we're going to do before we do the final render is we're going to check transparent film, because we're going to do some compositing and we're going to be using Photoshop or GIMP if that's your thing, and I'll explain why when we get to that. But let's now go ahead and do a render of what we have so far. Alright, so this is the render that we got, and I was planning to jump straight into do the compositing, but there is a couple of things that I've forgotten, and I think I should bring it up. Okay, so the biggest one, and this was something that I learned Again from Gilherm, Henrik. Thank you for your help, sir. But as I was putting together the final scene to render last night, he let me know of something and I forgot to include it in this tutorial. That when you're using this dirt shader, what you're doing is you're applying this this diffuse shader on top of the normal material, which is totally fine. But you're losing some of the bump detail, which is supposed to be coming from the rock, because it's going into this shader, which is then being overwritten by this shader. So to fix that, what you can do is if you actually take the output of this diffuse shader and put that into the normal, into the group input, what happens then is if you connect that to that, then you will actually get the shader, you'll actually get the bump map showing through the dirt. So it'll actually come out to look a lot nicer. So I'll do it for the 3 main ones, and I'll do it for the rocks in the foreground as well. Let me just see if I can select. There we go. There's the last big rock. Now you could do it for all of the smaller, the medium rocks, if you wanted to. But honestly, they're so small and there's so many of them, I don't think. Well, I mean, for my final one, I did it anyway. Like, every single rock had that kind of effect on it. But it does just take a while having to connect each and every one of them. So, I'll leave it up to you as to whether or not you want to go through with that. So there's that. The other thing I left in was I forgot to take out my little placement man. I won't bother appending in the astronaut because it's just an astronaut model, which was put together by Lucas Falcoa, who created it for us. But yeah, it's just an astronaut model. You can add your own spaceman or whatever it is you want to make. Obviously, the tutorial is not about making an astronaut. Now, the other thing is compositionally, by having this bright area in the foreground here, it actually detracts from, like, it puts too much attention in the foreground when really the story is happening in the background. So we're going to use our artistic talent and creative license to actually point the eye to what's important by using shadows. So what I'll do, my goodness, it's going around really fast. What I'll do is, first of all, let me just hide some of this stuff because it's going really slowly here. Okay, there's that. So what I'm going to do is make a shadow. So I'm just going to grab some of these areas here using proportional fall off, turning that on with the O key. Where is it? Is it turning on? There we go. And then I will go into Shift Z for the rendered preview mode over there. Wait a little while for it to actually load up. Maybe I've got too much geometry for it. Maybe. We'll wait. Okay, there we go. Finally. That took way too long. I actually had to pause the recording. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is I'm just going to raise up that ground floor there. And what I want is there to be just a little bit of shadow in the foreground. Not totally, because I do want there to be, we've put a lot of detail into the stuff in the foreground there. So I'm just, I want there to be some light hitting it, but not too much light. If that makes sense. It should. Okay, so I'm just tweak that down there a little bit. A little bit more perhaps. So essentially I want it to sort of flow. Like I want the eyes to go from bottom right here up to the top left and then across to the ring over there. This of course is sort of talked about in my composition tutorial, which you can watch here if you haven't seen it. But yeah, it's just it's a way of it's guiding lines, using guiding lines to guide the viewer. So I think that looks pretty nice to me. I think it does. So what I'll do is I'll give it another render right now, and yeah, we'll see how that looks. Actually, before I do the rendering, I'll make some quick adjustments to this dirt and stuff here, but I'll do that off camera. All right, so there we go. We have the final render finally done. So just to tell you what I did, so I just adjusted the AO thing here. So I just painted over some of those really bad, splotches of the ground that was showing through the rocks. So I just painted over them white, and then I also went over it again with like a black brush for some of the big rocks to make some more sort of sweeping sand dunes up against the rocks. And also the, yeah, you can see the shadow is now cast here, and you can see that now there's less focus on the foreground, you know, than what was before. You can see this was the before, and now this is the after. And now it's more towards on the middle and the background, which is exactly what we want. So we're gonna really improve this scene next, doing the compositing. Now you could do the compositing inside of Blender. You could do it all in here. You could do your color grading. We could add in the dust. We could do everything like that. But it just takes longer. And it's a difference between making this really short and adding another 15 minutes to this already super in-depth tutorial. So I'm going to use what most artists use, what most professionals use in a case like this, and that is to go with Photoshop. It's a still, if this was an animation, I'd totally stick with the Blender's Compositor. The trouble with Blender's Compositor, and the thing that I don't like, is that every time you make an adjustment, like you adjust one little thing over here, it has to re-render everything all through the nodes. Whereas using an image editor like GIMP or Photoshop, it's instantaneous. So I prefer Photoshop. You can stick with Blender if you like. We will be doing one thing in Blender first, though, and that's to extract the Z, which is the depth pass, because we're going to use that to add dust, like this atmospheric effect to the scene. So to do that, we need to first of all add in a map value node, which is underneath the vector options right there, map value. And what we're going to do with this is connect it to the Z output of our render layer. And if we hit Control Shift and then click on it, turn on the backdrop, and you'll see it's completely white. But if you turn down the size to something really small, like 0.1, then you will start to see, whoops, oh, come on, go back. I have to press V a couple of times. There we go. You can start to see a depth coming through there, which is good. Now you can't see as far back into the scene as, like, we want to be able to see the ring in the background. So I'm going to go even smaller in size. Still can't quite see it. So I'm going to go smaller in size again. Still can't quite see it. Hopefully, there we go. Okay, so that's really super far into the background there. Now it's up to you. I mean, what I would probably do in this situation, I might just go with this one right here. And for the really, you know, stuff that's way out in the background there, I'll just I'll adjust it in Photoshop by doing some paint over it. But anyway, this won't make much sense to you right now. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to export this as one separate image. So to do that, first of all, if you make a change in the compositor, if you want it to affect the rendered image, then you have to make sure that the UV image editor is open and that render result is currently open as well. Anyway, when you do that, now it will actually adjust the render result. If it's not open on the screen, it won't. Yeah, it's, again, it's one of those things that's really quite annoying to me, and I wish that it didn't do that, but it does. So yeah, such is life. Okay. All right, let's add it in here. So we'll call this render Z, or Z, as we call it here in Australia and Canada, I believe. So do that, and then we'll save another one, putting into the compositor as the same thing, but without the Z. And there we go. Now, won't make much sense until we start using it. Okay, so again, I'm using Photoshop. You're welcome to use GIMP. It's pretty much the same sort of thing. I just prefer Photoshop. So I'll load this in, practice. Oh my goodness. See, this is the bane of my existence, is trying to, I just hate myself. Like the file structure, it just gets all completely out of whack. And then I feel like I'm almost there, so I don't bother fixing it. I just stick with it. Anyway, so what I've done is I've just applied the Z pass over the top of the render here. Now, if we set this to screen, you can see that that happens. Now you can see it's really starting to look cool. It looks like this hazy effect. And this is really one of the things that separates, you know, a good render from a bad render, is that, you know, over great distances of space, or I don't mean space in like the, you know, outside the world, but any area on Earth, there's always an atmospheric fall off. This because there's tiny little particles in there. Even in the cleanest part, like when we usually associate it with smog, but even in the cleanest parts of the world, there's little dust and pollen in the air and tiny little things. So there will always be this hazy effect, depending on where it is and what it is. It can be blue, it can be yellow, it can be all sorts of things. Mars, we're going to go with a sort of a yellowy look. Now, if I want to apply something to just this individual, just this layer right here, what I can do is I can go to File. So yeah, first of all, I'll add in the curves like this, and I'll just tweak this. So I want to make this slightly yellowish colored, so I'll just increase the. Actually, what I could do is just. That wasn't what I wanted. I'll just decrease the blue. There we go. There's a little tip I learned ages ago while studying architecture, was that if you're going to do color grading, like it's better to remove values than add values, because otherwise you can sort of get more, it can like, it's adding lightness to the image, which can make peaking, like it can peak in value. So that's just a weird little tip I learned. Now I only want it to apply to just this dust path, so you can go and select it, and then create clipping mask, and now will only be applied to this this one here, not the one that's underneath it. So anyway, now that we've done that, we can turn it down until we've got a level that we sort of like. So looking at this, okay, now it's hard to tell because we haven't got a background in it yet, so let's add a background. Now you could, if you wanted to, like you could just add in a colored background, like something like if we made this a yellowy color, like sort of that, and then we could make another layer underneath it, make it the background like that, and then you could maybe make a different color here for the top and sort of just paint over it, and you could very quickly create a background. What I'm going to do, because I actually want there to be like a small mountain in the background as well, I'm actually going to use an image from NASA. So let me just load this in here. I think it's this one. Let's have a look. Yeah, it's that one. So I will load this in, and I did that by using the place function, by the way. File, place, linked. So I've got it hotkey to Control Shift F, but yeah. Okay, so now that we've done that, I'll just increase the scale of that. And what this will do is it'll also act as a guiding line. Like when my astronaut was there sort of looking out, it sort of guides you to this ring here, which is kind of cool. Right. Okay, that lightness, it's a little bit too intense. So I'm just turning it down a little bit further. And the other thing I'll do is I'll add a mask just for this layer here. And if I just, how do we make it so I just see this just see this mask? I think mask mode. Oh, how do you go into mask mode? Forget it. I'll just turn off everything else except that one. I'll just turn it all the way up. And let's go like this. Right, except the backdrop. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to paint out the severe lightness, which would be making the whole background look really super pale. Sorry, the sky, I don't want it to be super white. I just want it to be just sort of like the haziness near the ground. So by using that mask there, I'm doing that. There we go. Whoops, that wasn't what I wanted. Just paint some of it back in again. Oh, I was painting on the wrong one. I was supposed to be painting on the... Oh my goodness. I painted a little bit on the thing anyway. So I was supposed to be painting onto the mask and I used up all my history clicks. Anyway. So just like this on the mask there, which of course allows you then to reverse it by painting white on that. Sorry if this part is, a little bit too over the top of your head right now. I'm just trying to keep it quick because we are sort of dragging on a bit with this tutorial. Okay, and then I'll turn this down to around about 40-something% like that. Cool. All right, now the final thing that we'll do is some color grading on top. So for that, we're going to use a curves mask like this. Sorry, a curves adjustment layer. And I'll turn down the contrast, so I'll sort of crush the blacks a little bit. And I'll add in some red tint. So to do that, I could turn down the blue a little bit like that, as well as the green. And that will overall make everything feel very red. As well as that, what I'll do is just over where we've got this, this ring, I'm just using a very soft brush right here. And I'm just painting wherever I want there to be a ring. And it's nice to use a brush instead of using like the you know, the effect in Blender. Like you can add a glow effect pretty easily, but you have less control over it. And I do like having this, you know, being able to control which parts of it are going to look, you know, more glowy or less glowy, you know. So yeah, it's just nice. Turn down the flow a little bit. Bring some back. You get the idea. And there you go. So I think that, let's compare it to the original. Oh yeah, one other thing I did just for the sky, sort of hone it in your vision a little bit, like so that it, just make a vignette, essentially. I won't try to explain that, honing in a vision. Where was I going with that? But yeah, essentially something like this. Just to keep the eyes on what is important, which is the scene, really. So I'm just, and that'll stop your eyes from floating off to the left there, and then I'll just do a little bit here as well. And it also makes the scene feel a little bit more ominous. Like, you know, the sky is very rarely black unless something has gone very wrong. So it just sort of feels, yeah, a little bit, I don't know, feels cool. I like it. And I think I got that idea from Yuri Shwedov, who is one of my favorite digital painters, matte painters. I interviewed him actually when I was learning digital painting, and looking at his images, he does a lot of this, like that's sort of how he gets that post-apocalyptic look to his paintings, sort of chilling sort of look. Yeah, looking at that. Oh yeah, the other thing I did was just in the background, so just above that background layer there, is I use the black and white like that, but I go filter, render, clouds, and then I set that to multiply, and then I turn it way down. And that's just going to add, like, just make it look like it's sort of like dusty in the background there, which is a, actually I could try adding it there. Nah, maybe not. Which is just, yeah, it just makes it look a little bit more like there's something else going on there. And that is basically it, guys. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you learned something. I hope you can make a cool scene with it. If you do make something cool, please post it in the comments on Blender Guru. I always like seeing what it is that you make. The only thing I did differently else for this scene was, I mean, obviously just spending a lot more time fine-tuning it. But I painted in an extra mask on the ground so that parts of it have what look like sort of rock underneath it, just sort of showing through, which is quite simple to do. But it just added time to the tutorial, so I decided to leave it out. And of course the astronaut, which is obviously not for this tutorial. Something else I probably should have done for the final render is enabled depth of field for the camera, so that you've got this part here being out of focus. And I forgot it for my final render too. I did it in Photoshop. But anyways, there you go, guys. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.